Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about the installation and calibration of the vise. First, let's review the task. A company has a batch of parts that need to be processed at our school. This batch of parts consists of internal and external cavity shapes. These parts are processed by 2 employees. By observation, we can determine that one part is qualified and the other is unqualified. The unqualified part has a misalignment in the cavity during processing. Students, think about it. What caused the misalignment of the cavity? The main reason is the improper calibration of the vise during installation. This ultimately led to the unqualified part. Therefore, it is necessary for us to learn the correct installation and calibration of the vise. Learning objectives: to use measuring tools correctly and skillfully, and to install and calibrate the vise correctly. First, let's get familiar with the measuring tool for calibrating the vise. The dial gauge. Before using the dial gauge, gently press the measuring head with your fingers. Observe if the needle moves smoothly and returns to its original position after releasing it. If it works properly, then proceed to adjust the zero position of the dial gauge. Turn the dial to set the main pointer to the zero position. When using the dial gauge, you should also understand its working principle. When the measuring rod of the dial gauge shortens, the needle on the dial turns clockwise. When the measuring rod of the dial gauge lengthens, the needle on the dial turns counterclockwise. The tools we need for installing the vise include a dial gauge, copper or aluminum rods, T-bolts, wrenches, and so on. Now, let's learn the specific steps for correctly installing and calibrating the vise. There are 5 steps for installing the vise. First, before installation, clean the workbench and the bottom surface of the vise with a clean cotton cloth. Ensure there are no metal shavings or oil residues. Second, roughly position the vise and insert the T-bolts into the T-slots on the workbench. Third, pre-tighten the vise and gently tighten the bolts with a wrench to clamp the vise. Tighten the bolts diagonally and evenly to prevent the vise from shifting due to uneven tightening force. Fourth, calibrate the vise. When calibrating, first open the jaws of the vise, then attach the dial gauge to the spindle. Ensure that the measuring head of the dial gauge is perpendicular to the fixed jaw of the vise. Then, move to the center of the vise using the handwheel method. Next, move the Y-axis of the workbench in the negative direction to make the measuring contact point touch the surface of the jaws. The measurement rod should compress by 0.3 to 0.5 mm. Then, move the workbench in the negative X-axis direction manually. Move the dial gauge's contact point from left to right T and observe the needle's fluctuation direction. If the needle fluctuates counterclockwise, it means the vise is tilted to the left of the operator. In this case, use a copper rod to tap the lower left corner of the vise. Tap with a force equal to half of the dial gauge fluctuation. If the needle fluctuates clockwise, it means the vise is tilted to the right of the operator. In this case, use a copper rod to tap the lower right corner of the vise. The tapping force should be equal to half of the dial gauge fluctuation. Repeat this adjustment until the needle no longer fluctuates, or the fluctuation is reduced to 0.01 mm. At this point, the fixed jaw is parallel to the feeding direction of the workbench. This ensures good positional accuracy. After correcting the parallelism between the fixed jaw and the feeding direction, use the same method to manually move the spindle. Then, correct the perpendicularity between the fixed jaw and the workbench surface, ensuring that the dial gauge needle does not fluctuate or that fluctuation is within 0.01 millimeter. Fifth, tighten the vise using a wrench. When calibrating the vise, pay attention to the following. 1. When using the dial gauge, handle it with care and avoid directly hitting the measuring surface with the contact point to prevent damage. First, fix the dial gauge on a magnetic stand, then move the workbench handle to allow the contact point to slowly touch the surface being measured. 2. When pre-tightening, tighten the bolts diagonally and evenly to prevent shifting of the vise due to uneven tightening forces. Calibrating the vise is a basic skill that requires repeated practice. That's all for today's lesson. See you next time.